A very Merry Christmas to you. Now, 2024 turned out to be a very turbulent year for the royal family, but despite the health battles, the King and Queen, Prince and Princess of Wales and the extended House of Windsor have been flying the flag high for Brand Britain. I'm Cameron Walker, GBNews' royal correspondent, and this is a royal year. Coming up, in a year plagued by health struggles, we'll have the latest on the King and the Princess of Wales' cancer journey and why 2025 could be the year they come back fighting. Fresh from the Princess of Wales' Christmas Carol service at Westminster Abbey, we'll hear from one volunteer especially invited by the Princess. And as police appear to give up on ever finding the masked burglars who broke into the Windsor Castle estate back in October, we'll ask a former head of royal protection if security is up to scratch. Joining me throughout today's show is the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths. Charlotte, welcome. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
So first of all, 2024 has been quite the year for the royal family, to put it mildly. What's been your highlight and low light?
I think my highlight has been that video that Kate released. I know some people thought it was a bit cheesy and it was certainly highly untoward and not her usual style at all. But it was that moment when we all breathed a sigh of relief and we realised she's made it through. She's had enough energy to make a very complicated and detailed video about how well she was feeling. And finally, just as a royal correspondent as well, we could all just sort of relax and think, God, this poor woman isn't going to, be ill for the rest of the year, thank goodness.
It was a very cinematic video and it showed very personal moments between her and her closest family.
Yeah, it was so intimate. I mean, it was great for people like us because we're desperate to see inside, Catherine and William's marriage. But some people were a bit sceptical, thinking they'd gone a bit too kind of Meghan Markle-ish because it was quite a kind of Hollywood, glossy produced. But I thought it was lovely and it was really sweet. I love that moment when Charlotte sort of cringed because her parents were kissing, and I know my daughter does that as well on the rare occasions I kiss. It was like a real portrait of family life and just reminder that they are a real family. And very, very poignant because I think with the trolling that they got this year, I think it was a reminder to everyone that these aren't just kind of caricatures, these are human beings. And if you're going to wildly speculate online about their health, just remember that they're a real family.
Absolutely. In January, Buckingham Palace announced the King would be going into hospital for a procedure on an enlarged prostate. But it was post-operative tests that revealed the King had cancer. Here's a recap.
His Majesty King Charles III has been diagnosed with a form of cancer.
2024, the year of royal health battles. In January, the King went into hospital for treatment on an enlarged prostate, which was benign. His Majesty spent 3 nights at the London clinic before being discharged for a private period of rest. King Charles was widely praised for being so open about his condition. Searches on the NHS websites for enlarged prostates skyrocketed, and it's understood the King was keen to share details of his diagnosis to encourage other men who may be experiencing symptoms to get checked. The following month, Buckingham Palace released an important statement explaining King Charles had been diagnosed with a form of cancer.
My thoughts are with him, and to go through something like cancer but in the public eye is pretty something.
Yeah, it's sad. Hopefully he can make a recovery.
It's a shame for the family more than anything. You've got to think of the family like you would do your own family.
The King stepped back from public duties but continued working through his government red boxes. As winter rolled into spring, a glimmer of hope. Doctors gave him the green light to attend the traditional Easter Sunday service at St George's Chapel in Windsor. Previously advised to avoid large crowds, he greeted members of the public who had gathered.
We were trying to diagnose cancers earlier.
The King chose a Macmillan Cancer Centre in London for his first public engagement following his diagnosis, meeting fellow patients. From then on, the King ramped up his public appearances. Queen Camilla and the King's doctors struggled to persuade him to slow down, as the King was still continuing his weekly cycle of treatment. He persevered with several public engagements, but adaptations were made to keep the King well enough. He travelled in a carriage rather than on horseback during his Trooping the Colour birthday parade in June. By the autumn, the King was allowed to travel thousands of miles for a tour of Australia and attends the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa.
Charlotte Griffiths still joins me. When Buckingham Palace announced that he was initially going into hospital for an enlarged prostate, for example, I think he got a lot of praise for being so open with his health diagnoses.
Yeah, he was so open in a way his mother never was. We never really found out what kind of cancer he had, and I think that was quite wise, because what he was trying to guard against is people predicting life expectancy. And of course, once you know what kind of cancer it is, people can start guessing. So, but other than that, he shared in great detail, that he had cancer and that he'd been in and out of hospital and what the next steps were. And his aides talked very openly about the fact he has weekly cancer treatment. And this is highly unusual. I mean, I'm sure the Queen was very, very ill many times in her life, but we didn't really know about it, did we, till the end? And indeed, Boris Johnson, many years even after her death, said that she had bone cancer. But this was something that actually we in the royal fold sort of knew, but we just did not say, and it was never confirmed, which is actually why we couldn't say it. So it just goes to show, in one generation, the big difference between openness about their health.
It absolutely does. But of course, I think some would say that by not disclosing exactly what form of cancer you've got, you do leave yourself open to quite a bit of speculation.
Yes. Well, he'd gone in and said he had an enlarged prostate, so I think people kind of tried to guess that it was something to do with that, but we simply never know, really. Yes, I mean, certainly with Catherine, what we found out was that gaping hole of information led to a barrage of speculation. I mean, they really were hit really hard, weren't they? Especially when they edited and doctored the photo. So in that respect, secrecy did not work for them. And the king did not find that, because he had been very open from the off and he'd been advised to be open. So he didn't have that gaping hole.
And of course, when the king did start his treatments for cancer, he stood back from public duties, as did the Princess of Wales with her cancer diagnosis and abdominal surgery. But what it did do was show this whole idea of a slimmed down monarchy was very slim indeed. Not many working royals about this year.
No, because you had Camilla trying to look after her husband, so she was out of action. William exactly the same. So then you've got, it's a wife and a husband for every royal that's out of the game.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the four key players were out. Obviously, we all know where Meghan and Harry are, miles away. So that was a really big theme of this royal year, is sort of wondering, where they're going to kind of find royals from next to do all their appearances. And then Princess Anne got ill as well later in the year. And suddenly you thought, there's a lot of ribbon cutting that needs to be done and a lot of, things that need to be opened and ceremonies that need to be attended, and there just literally weren't enough royals to go around.
And the king was very determined to continue his duties as much as he could. And the Queen was saying it's actually a complete nightmare to try and get him to slow down.
Yeah, she's commented many times this year about how she'd rather he just put his feet up, but it's just not in his DNA at all. And then the real surprise came, and we'd been speculating about it a lot, that he went to Australia.
Yeah.
And we did think, God, he's not going to be able to do any foreign royal tours, let alone Australia. It's the other side of the world. But he was absolutely determined to do it. And it just goes to show how hard he's been working despite having cancer.
Charlotte Griffiths, editor at Large at Mail on Sunday. Thank you for now. We'll be back with you a bit later. Now, did you watch the Princess of Wales's carol service on telly on Christmas Eve? It was simply magical. I felt very lucky to be there. And it was wonderful, actually, to see the princess with her family after what's been, let's be frank, a very testing year for her, undergoing preventative chemotherapy for cancer. Now, 18-year-old Olivia Bowditch, she volunteers at a charity called From Me to You, a charity which sends anonymous letters to cancer patients to make them feel loved and supported. Olivia has been a volunteer for a number of years and wanted to help people experiencing cancer feel less lonely. And she actually sent a letter to the princess earlier this year, sharing her support and telling her about the charity and her volunteer work. And then, by complete surprise, the princess actually invited her to the carol service, and I spoke to Olivia a little bit earlier.
I started writing for them, and then they distribute these letters out to people in hospital wards, and so I was hoping that these letters would hopefully kind of bring some joy to these people living with cancer's day.
Sure, and you decided to write a letter to the Princess of Wales following her cancer diagnosis. Before we talk about the letter itself, how did you feel when you heard that she was undergoing preventative chemo?
I think it's a really difficult thing. People living with cancer will know that it can be such an isolating process. And actually, I think my heart just really went out to her because, she is a royal, and it can be easy to distance yourself from the royal family, but actually she's still a person. She has to undergo all these different processes that everyone else has to. And actually, she's also a mother, and I thought she, like many other mothers, will be thinking about her family, her children, her husband. So I think my heart really went out to her because this will be a difficult time for her. And actually, I did say in the letter, I hope you take the kind of time with your family that you need, and actually, you know, really treasure that time with them.
And presumably she must have received it. Did you get some kind of response from one of her aides, or what happened?
So I didn't get directly a response, but I did get a response in the form of an invitation to the carol service. I obviously wasn't expecting anything. I wasn't even expecting a response. And actually it was really lovely to hear back, and the Royal Foundation were absolutely brilliant.
What was it like actually attending the carol service in Westminster Abbey?
I mean, it was a gorgeous ceremony, wasn't it? It was an incredible experience. I think, you know, we're living in a world where there are certain things that we could have far less of, but, you know, love and hope and empathy is something that we could have a lot more of. And it was really lovely that Princess Kate invited everyone there to celebrate that. And I think you had people there from lots of different walks of life, you know, rich or poor, young and old. And it was really brilliant to see everyone come together, especially in the season of giving, and celebrate that.
For sure. And I think what was really lovely was there was lots of people there who had been touched by cancer previously, of course, including the princess.
Yes, of course.
And I suppose the charity, it shows that lots of people go through this, doesn't it? And lots of people need support, particularly around Christmas time.
Yes, definitely. And like I said, I think it's heartbreaking to think that these people could be living with cancer and be alone, you know, if they don't have relatives nearby. And I think, like I said, it's really important that we reach out to these people and really, you know, bring them back into the fold, make sure they don't feel alone, especially during this season. And
do you think From Me to You would perhaps benefit from a patronage from the Princess of Wales?
Well, I did ask in the letter, so we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I definitely think they would. It's an incredible charity. I would encourage anyone to sign up and start writing for them.
Olivia Bowditch there, and let's see, watch this space if the Princess ever becomes patron of that charity From Me to You. Coming up, we'll be discussing the Princess of Wales's difficult year and how 2025 could be far more positive. Welcome back. Now, months of social media speculation and scrutiny followed after the Princess of Wales stood back from public duties to recover from major abdominal surgery. Little did the public know she was secretly battling cancer. An edited Mother's Day photo meant hysteria reached fever pitch online, and weeks later, the Princess bravely told her story.
In January, I underwent major abdominal surgery in London, and at the time, it was thought that my condition was non-cancerous. The surgery was successful. However, tests after the operation found cancer had been present. My medical team therefore advised that I should undergo a course of preventative chemotherapy, and I'm now in the early stages of that treatment.
Gosh, such a brave video from the Princess there. Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, is back with me. Charlotte, when you first saw that video, it was so shocking, I think, to so many members of the public, but even for us as journalists as well.
God, seeing that video again, I remember feeling so shocked. I mean, I knew the video was coming. We'd been given about a couple of hours warning. And then I just remember seeing how frail she was and her voice faltering. And she looked so, so different. And I also just felt so bad that this poor woman had to release that video. She was clearly very weak and extremely tired. But the hysteria around the photo, some would say slightly self-inflicted. Maybe someone in her team should not have doctored that picture. We'll never really know. But I just thought, oh dear, we've driven this poor, poor woman. I say we, not the press, but just the whole world really, out of hiding. And then what we saw there was just a very frail and tired and very sad-looking Kate, and she was clearly very worried, and it was shocking.
Yeah, and a frail-looking mother as well. And I think one of perhaps the reasons she wanted to keep her life private was for the sake of protecting her 3 young children.
Yeah, and what a brilliant and fair justification for doctoring that picture. And, you know, little did those trolls know on social media, you know, what she was really hiding. You know, and the speculation was insane. And then when we saw that bench, we realised, oh my God, you know, actually she's been incredibly, incredibly ill. There's no sort of wild, hilarious stuff going on. It's really, really serious. And she's had to go onto that bench, be filmed because of the hysteria, really.
Absolutely. But it got much happier a few months later because we did get a positive video, which you spoke about a little bit earlier, but from the Princess confirming that she had completed her chemotherapy. Take a look.
As the summer comes to an end,
I cannot tell you what a relief it is to have finally completed my chemotherapy treatment. Doing what I can to stay cancer-free is now my focus. Although I have finished chemotherapy, my path to healing and full recovery is long, and I must continue to take each day as it comes.
Far happier, Charlotte.
Yeah, what a contrast. She's full of joie de vivre and looking very happy and positive. There was lots of symbolism, wasn't there, with the trees and the garden. And it was really nice, and to see her playing with her kids and just full of energy. Whereas on the bench, you could tell sitting was an effort, really, to be honest, in that bench video. And there you could see her sort of frolicking on the beach and in the woods. It was just a lot of action, a lot of movement, and it was a very vibrant video. I loved it.
And how she found sanctuary in nature as well, one of the key themes, perhaps.
Yeah, you could really tell that she'd, obviously, like many people with cancer, she'd really done some deep thinking and that she'd slightly changed her vision of the world and appreciated nature, family, love, all those kind of good things. And Sarah Ferguson, actually, has also said, don't wait to have cancer to find out those things. Live your life to the full, live in the present. And I thought that really came through on the video, that she was saying, these are the things I've learned through this journey, and she wanted to share them with people.
I'm very open access from the princess, particularly I'm thinking the scene of the kitchen table, I believe it's Amner Hall in Norfolk, where we had Mike and Carol Middleton with the 3 children and William as well, just simply playing cards like every other family would.
Actually, I think my family doesn't play enough cards. But, no, it was a very traditional view of the family. And actually, we've known for years that one of the things that William loved about the Middletons when he first, years and years ago, when they first started dating, was that they sit around the kitchen table playing cards and eating a roast and just chatting with each other very, very informally. And of course, to someone like Prince William, that's grown up as he has done in royal palaces, it was a revelation to see this side of family life. And it's obviously something he wants to recreate with his own family. So all these years later, it was nice to see that in a video, that he has actually done that. For his own family, he's provided what he never could, which is a slight sense of normalcy and down-to-earth, wholesome card playing.
For sure. Charlotte, for now, thank you. You'll be back with me a little bit later on. But coming up, after thieves smashed through a gate close to where the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children live, we'll be asking just how safe is Windsor Castle? Welcome back to A Royal Year with me, Cameron Walker. Still to come, we'll be speaking to one mother being supported by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, whose son was killed after being groomed online. But first, in October, 2 men broke into an outbuilding in the grounds of Windsor Castle, not far from where the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children were sleeping. They made off with farming equipment by smashing through a gate. But this wasn't the only security breach this year. In February, a man was caught trespassing close to the King's private apartments. He was subsequently detained under the Mental Health Act. So is Windsor Castle security tight enough? We're joined by former head of Royal Protection, Di Davis. Di, thank you so much for joining me. Now, police appear to have given up on ever finding these masked burglars, unless any other information comes to light. Should we be concerned about this?
Well, it's an interesting facet that, like so many of the people I live down here, farms are regularly burgled and equipment taken, and very few are actually recovered. I find it quite amazing because quite clearly these two with their balaclavas and descriptions were seen, because I haven't been there for many, many years, but I'm aware that there were sophisticated cameras. So as the police were able to say precisely what time they were seen on these cameras, clearly they had some identification in one shape or another. And I'd be looking far more thoroughly at any information in terms of who could have actually done a reconnaissance, what type of people are actually going there. Clearly, I don't know the ins and outs. It's quite a large farm from recollection. And again, that's got a lot of outbuildings. If you look at it, it's a barrier now. In my day, if I recall again, they were gates, but now it's a barrier. But if you look at the area now, it is covered with camera. I wouldn't expect the place to be, I would expect it to be patrolled, but I wouldn't expect there to be a 24-hour presence there. That's what I would say. And there's a lot of misunderstanding of how royalty protection is actually carried out by people, including the media.
And of course, this took place relatively close to where the Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children live, about a 5-minute drive away.
Well, it's an interesting concept. And as with any incident, and as you know, I've been researching the attacks on the royals since George III. So it isn't unusual in the sense that it surprises me. What is good, it will necessarily carry out a review. But again, protecting royals is like an onion. You have layers upon layers. So I wasn't particularly concerned initially when I heard that this barrier was broken with somebody going out. But it does raise the question, what more could be done? But in terms of protecting them, without going into obvious detail, there are layers of technical and support, and the principal royals are all 24/7 protected with armed officers, and there will be and are contingency plans should anyone have got anywhere much nearer, I suspect. I would hope so.
Just how well protected are the royal family?
They're as protected as can be. There is no such thing as 24-hour full-time protection. If somebody really wants to get anyone in this country or abroad, they can. They'll do their best they can, and hopefully, like me, they will learn the lessons of history and ensure you then translate those lessons into the actions of today and tomorrow. It's as good as it gets, but it could be better, as we've seen with presidents being attacked and at home and in America and all the rest of it. We're very lucky in this country. The number of armed attacks against royals are very limited.
Di Davies, thank you so much for joining me here on GB News, and a Merry Christmas.
Anytime.
And just to say, Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace do not comment on security issues, and a spokesperson for Thames Valley Police said, "We have conducted an investigation following a number of lines of inquiry. The investigation has now been filed pending any further information coming to light." Now, the Queen's son, Tom Parker Bowles, has revealed the hell of a 2 years endured by his mother and the King, marked by significant health challenges. Tom Parker Bowles told the Daily Telegraph he's spending his first Christmas at Sandringham with the King and Queen. And we are delighted to be joined now by Ingrid Seward, Editor-in-Chief at Majesty Magazine. Ingrid, welcome, and a Merry Christmas to you. First of all, Tom Parker Bowles, the Queen's son, joining the Sandringham Christmas, of course, used to be a very closed-off, formal affair for the royal family under Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. Do you think this shows the idea of a blended family with the King and Queen Camilla, and perhaps a less formal affair than it once was?
I think it certainly is. I mean, Laura Parker Bowles, Camilla's daughter, has been to Sandringham before, but I mean, maybe we'll actually see Tom in the, in the church walk. I don't know. That would be unusual because normally it's just members of the royal family, but it would be interesting if they, if they brought the Queen's family in as well. I think it would be very nice. I know that King Charles likes everything to be exactly the same, but he also is able to move forward with the times. And I think it's just it's more family orientated if you see the Queen's family as well as the King's.
And as Tom says, it's been a hell of a few years for the King and Queen, most notably, of course, with the King's health battles. And the Queen's really had to hold the fort in somewhat, carrying out engagements despite all of this going on in the background.
Well, I think that as everyone will agree that the King's had an extremely difficult year and he's been absolutely brilliant. But Camilla really stepped forward. When King Charles was having his first rounds of chemo for his cancer, which we still don't know what kind of cancer it was, but he got through it. But he had to rest. Even he, who hates to rest, he absolutely had to rest. So Camilla took over on quite a few of the engagements that he would have done with her. She did them on her own, and she was absolutely brilliant, and she really stepped up to the mark. So all those accusations about her perhaps being a bit lazy and avoiding the royal duties she doesn't want to do, I think were absolutely cleared away by the fact that she stood up there and she got on with it, and people loved her.
And I think one of those passions that Queen Camilla has spoken about this year is domestic violence, a cause she's championed, and there was a documentary on ITV all about it. It does show perhaps that it is an issue she's taking very seriously.
I thought the Queen was so brilliant. I thought, I wonder if she's got friends that have been involved in this domestic violence, because it doesn't just, it happens to all across the board, all classes. And I wondered if, Camilla's got a really big group of girlfriends, if not someone there hadn't experienced it, because she was so positive and so concerned. And it, previously that there hadn't been a member of the royal family that had dealt with it in the way that she has. And I think she was, very good in that documentary, surprisingly good.
And what do you think 2025 will have in store for Queen Camilla?
Well, I think people are beginning to realise how much she does support her husband, because I think she's still like a real, what I call a real person. She hasn't been brought up, having absolutely everything done for her. So she's had to exist in the real world. And I think she brings that reality to Charles, who people used to complain how spoiled he was and how he always had, so many staff around him doing things for him. But I think Camilla has opened his world up. And since he's become king, and I'm sure, the most viewers, and I know you do, Cameron, he seems to be so much more relaxed. And, he's being hugged. He's actually, reacting with the crowd, his subjects, in a way that he certainly hasn't done before, and in a way that the late Queen was not of the generation to do. The late Queen's generation didn't do all that hugging, and it would have been very alien to her. And in a way, Charles is 76, it's probably slightly alien to him, but he's embraced it, and I think Camilla has really helped with that.
OK, Ingrid Seward, Editor-in-Chief at Majesty Magazine, thank you so much for joining me. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Cameron. Been a pleasure.
Up next.
The beautiful faces you see before you, their smiles, their dreams, all lost.
We'll speak to one mother being supported by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, whose son was killed after being groomed online. Welcome back to A Royal Year. Now, earlier in 2024, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex launched the Parents Network, supporting parents of children harmed by social media use. And that harm can have devastating consequences. Here's Prince Harry speaking in September.
These children, and thousands more, meant the world to their families. The beautiful faces you see before you, their smiles, their dreams, all lost. All too soon, and all because of social media. It's why we launched the Parents Network, a global community that provides crucial support to parents whose children have suffered from the harmful effects of social media.
Well, one of those children Prince Harry was speaking about there was Breck Bednar, who lived in Surrey. And in 2014, he was murdered after being groomed online while playing video games and lured to his killer's flat in Essex. He was 14 years old. His mother, Lauren Lefebvre, set up the Breck Foundation to help children and young people reclaim the internet. She was invited by Harry and Meghan to join the Parents Network and joins me now. Lauren, thank you so much for joining me. First of all, can you just explain to me what Breck was like?
He was an easy boy. My first, I tried for 4 years to have him, and it felt like forever. And when he finally came, I was over the moon. He even coped when we had triplets and he had to deal with 3 babies at once. He would just sometimes shake his head and walk away, but he never hurt them or lashed out like some big brothers would.
He sounds like a great brother and a great son as well. And the online world did, in the most awful way, affect him, didn't it? It was a vicious spiral.
It did. And the thing is he loved being online. And I didn't mind him being online because it brought him joy. He would laugh and joke and sort of sometimes even debate and with his friends online, some of them, most of them from school. And it was a predator that infiltrated this school group. So he was having a fun time.
And when did you first start to notice that something clearly wasn't right?
noticed someone that had a deeper sounding voice. And it was about a year before Breck was killed that I noticed that I didn't like the sound of this person. And, parents, sometimes children think their parents are paranoid or, overprotective or over worried. But I sensed it straight away that this person didn't seem like the other boys. He was in control, he was in charge and running the show. And it just didn't feel how I wanted it to feel. And so when I questioned Breck, he would say, oh, yeah, this guy runs the server. He's super clever. He's got an amazing career. He's so good with technology. He's teaching me all these things. We're learning so much. And he was excited. He was enjoying his life. But little did any of us know, how sort of sinister this person really was.
And that's something that the Breck Foundation helps with, right? You go into schools and you help educate children.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I just went everywhere at the beginning to just tell Breck's story so people would learn about it. And I'm now luckily, enough. We have other speakers now, and the foundation has grown. So we try to reach, as many children as possible, because all it takes is one lesson for someone to think, maybe that's happening to my friend, maybe that's happening to me, or my sister or brother. And I think that's what it's about, is sharing this knowledge so that it doesn't continue to happen, because predators won't disappear. We just need to be more strong in our education. And we also need to get social media companies and gaming companies to take responsibility.
And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry and Meghan, set up the Parents Network to support parents of young people who'd experienced online harms. And were you approached by the team? How did you get involved?
Well, some of the groups that I campaign with, we were invited in to, learn about what they were doing and stand together. And I think that's what's really most important is standing together and collaborating to really get the laws put in place to make sure children are as safe as they can be online. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful for obviously everyone who's helping in this arena.
And is there a lot of support with the Parents Network? All of you supporting each other?
We do. We have sort of different WhatsApp groups, and we meet up to do different campaigning events. I think what's really hard is, we're all at different stages, and some people are still trying to find answers in investigations. And then we see news stories where it's happening again and again. And we want change. And it's too late, obviously, for our children. But we want change. We don't want other children to be affected by this. It doesn't go away. I mean, yesterday I heard sort of a first Christmas song, and it broke my heart, because I'm thinking I won't have all my babies with me at Christmas. And there's so many, children that are affected, even the ones that aren't killed, but harmed in other ways. And I think because the internet has grown, but the safety features weren't put in from the start, it's like we're trying to back these safety features in.
And do you think Harry and Meghan's status, their fame, can amplify this cause?
Absolutely. I think everything sort of gets more notice when it has somebody that's interesting. With Breck Foundation, I've been wishing and trying for all these years to get a sort of public face, because it just brings more notice. When people like to listen to a celebrity or a royal or, some people that have, some sort of famous element, it just brings more attention to it and helps with the cause. And I think that's really important, because sometimes we just feel like a bunch of parents with no faces. We're just any old parent. And yet this can happen to any child. So I think it is really helpful to have somebody who, somebody so famous that take the time to, again, help others.
Lauren, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Prince Andrew's yearly £1 million living allowance has been cut by his brother King Charles, according to a new book by royal writer Robert Hardman. The move will be seen as another step that the King has publicly taken to distance himself from his younger brother following his association with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. But Can he afford to stay in the 30-bedroom mansion Royal Lodge? According to reports, he's found the money from somewhere. Meanwhile, his judgment's been called into question yet again after being linked to an alleged Chinese spy. Well, Charlotte Griffiths is back with me. I mean, where do you start with Prince Andrew? First of all, very briefly on this alleged spy incident, which is still playing out. It does call into question his judgment a little bit, doesn't it?
Of course, but it's sort of what we've come to expect from Andrew. He just loves to court these very controversial figures. So long as they've got a big wallet and they might show signs of being willing to open it for him, he seems so drawn to these characters. And Epstein, of course, was the famous association he should never have had. And now we find he's in the middle of another deeply embarrassing association. And his role as trade envoy for years and years only made this worse because it almost sanctioned his right to sort of hobnob with questionable people from all over the world, as well as, fairly standard people. But, it gave him an avenue, didn't it?
And of course, the Royal Lodge issue keeps going on. We understand, according to reports, that King Charles has stopped paying for the upkeep of Royal Lodge, but he has found the money from somewhere. And you wrote a very interesting article in the Mail on Sunday about all this and how he could potentially be paying for it. What do you reckon?
Well, there's this strange narrative coming out of the York family and people that know the York family saying, well, Charles has reassured his brother that he'll always be okay and that Royal Lodge will always be looked after and he'll always be okay. So it gives the impression that somehow he's funding the upkeep of Royal Lodge. But I know that sounds mad because the thing is that Charles has been desperate to get him out. But then again, Charles actually loves buildings and history. He doesn't want Royal Lodge to go to rack and ruin. And actually, Andrew has legally every right to stay in that building. So it's a question of, as well, preserving the actual building. By all accounts, it's a little bit, how shall I put this delicately, scruffy inside, a lot of clutter. And I just think that Charles would much, much prefer his brother to be living at Frogmore Cottage. But in the event that he refuses to move and he does have the right to stay, he's going to somehow, that's what we're hearing anyway, somehow provide for Royal Lodge so that it doesn't actually fall down around him.
And do you think, thinking of looking into 2025 now, do you think there's a possibility that he will be forced to move out, or do you think he'll get the nail to stay in?
I actually think this Chinese spy thing will be the final sort of nail in his coffin, as it were, for staying at Royal Lodge, because Charles has tried to... The siege of Royal Lodge has been something we've been talking about all year. Every time he's made a move to cut Andrew off, Andrew's found a way around it. And it's just gone on and on and on. And Charles has been outfoxed, really, by his brother. But this is so embarrassing, this Chinese spy thing, and the fact that people were able to move in and out of Royal Lodge undetected, as he himself admitted, means that, his position there is untenable. He's got to move to Frogmore Cottage. And by the way, who wouldn't want to live at Frogmore Cottage? It had a £2.4 million makeover. Apparently it's very stylish, very modern, very warm. It sounds wonderful.
Well, I'm sure it's very Meghan Markle style, isn't it? And I'm sure her taste is actually quite nice when it comes to interior design.
Yeah, it probably is. She's very heavily influenced by the Soho House brand with her interiors.
Yes.
And I think they got quite involved, actually, in the decoration of this place. So if he feels a sort of Soho House energy about him in 2025, I'd say he should just embrace Frogmore Cottage.
I mean, I certainly would. But anyway, I'm sure there's some more predictions you've got for us for 2025. What are your top three, do you reckon? I
think this will be the year we find out where George is going to school. And I don't think it's going to be Eton. I know that, William obviously went to Eton and there's a lot of talk about him going to Eton. I just don't think Catherine wants him to go to Eton. So I think we'll find out where he's going to school and it'll make a big difference knowing where George is going to school because we'll know what, our future king is up to for the next few years.
Marlborough, do you reckon, where the princess went?
I think Marlborough. I think maybe they might consider something closer to Norfolk as well. I think co-ed is really high on their list of priorities because it means that all three can go to the same school and be secured, have plenty of security because once you've kind of secured a school, you may as well get all the kids doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But also because Catherine went to Marlborough and absolutely loved it and thrived there. And she'd had a really bad experience at Down House, her previous school. So it meant a lot to her that she found Marlborough. And there's definitely hysteria at Marlborough among the parents. I'm always hearing this. They've seen them there and will they go there? I actually don't think they will. It's hard to tell, but I think they're going to pick something a bit more unusual, a bit more closer to Norfolk.
Oh, well, I guess we'll find out. And what about David and Victoria Beckham? We saw them at the Qatari state visit, didn't we, last month in November, or very early December. Any knighthoods on the cards?
I always used to say I don't think David Beckham's going to get knighthood because let's not forget that famous email he sent with some very rude words in it, sort of railing against the fact he hadn't had one and he deserved one. And that made me think, no, the royal family will never give him one after that email. But when I saw him at the Qatari state banquet, and, you know, he had every right to be there for his Qatari links, which in themselves are probably, you know, quite contentious. Anyway, but it did get me thinking, David Beckham's going to get a knighthood, and he probably deserves one. He's our most famous football player and the most famous football player in the world. And he plays the game, and he actually genuinely loves the royal family, as we found out when he queued for 24 hours to see the Queen, you know, lying in her coffin.
You certainly did. Well, watch this space. Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large at Mail on Sunday. Thank you so much for joining me, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Well, that's it for a Royal Year 2024. Don't forget, we have a Royal Tours special airing this Christmas too, so keep an eye out for that. I'm Cameron Walker. Thank you for your company this hour. All that's left to say is a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.